Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we will discuss everything you need to know about Google My Maps. Now I'm sure pretty much all of you guys have used Google Maps at some point of time. So before we get on with this tutorial, it's quite important to know how Google My Maps actually differ from the standard Google Maps environment. So Google Maps is basically a web mapping service provided by Google that offers things like satellite imagery, street maps, street view perspectives, as well as real-time traffic conditions and route planning for traveling by foot, car, bicycle, and public transportation. Now on the other hand, Google My Maps is basically a feature within Google Maps that allows the users to create custom maps with markers, lines, and shapes, and it allows the users to save and share their own personal maps with others. Now Google My Maps is so cool that it can be used to create custom maps for personal use or business use cases. Now one of the cool things when it comes to using Google My Maps is that it can also import a bunch of data from spreadsheets or even from a KML file to actually create a map. And once you create a map, you can just basically go ahead and share it with others by providing them with a link. So guys, we'll be covering all these different features of Google My Maps in the next 20 to 30 minutes. So I welcome you all to tag along to expand your knowledge on Google My Maps to make your day-to-day tasks much easier and efficient with this amazing application. And in the example that I'm going to use today, I'll be using a scenario of one having to drive their vehicle from Leeds East Airport to a place called Wheatlands Lodge in the city of York, and basically spend the rest of the day visiting 5 interesting places around York. So let's go right ahead and see how we can translate this information into a live map in Google. So guys, to open Google My Maps, all you have to do is just search for mymaps.google.com. Now guys, if you're using Google My Maps for the very first time, this is the kind of interface that you're actually going to get. However, if you have used Google My Maps, let's say to create a draft of a map, that draft would appear right over here, even if you close the program. So everything that you do over here is actually getting saved to the corresponding Google Drive that's associated with your Google account. So that's pretty cool. Now, assuming that we are doing this for the very first time, we have a couple of options. So you can create a new map either by clicking right over here, or even if you happen to click on this menu button right over here, you will get the option to create a new map. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and click right over here, and that'll basically open up the map canvas for you guys. So first of all, it'll be convenient to actually zoom into our particular area of interest. So for this example, I'll be zooming into the central part of United Kingdom, and this is the town that we're actually going to visit. So the very first thing that you guys can do is actually add a proper title to your map. So here you can see that by default it's going to get titled as untitled. So if you click over here, you would actually be able to add a proper title. So I'm just going to simply put down as visit to York. And of course, along with that, you can simply go ahead and add a description as well, especially if that can be helpful for a person to whom you're trying to pass on this map later on. But in this case, I think it's pretty self-explanatory what we are going to do. So I'm not really going to add a description for this particular case. So let's click on save here. And you can see that the title actually got changed. So that's how you basically change the title of your map. And similar to a GIS software, well, even though it's not as advanced as dedicated GIS software packages like QGIS or ArcGIS, Google My Maps also works in a similar fashion in terms of how it treats or how it arranges its layers. So here you can see that we have by default one layer called untitled layer, and if you want, you can actually keep adding stuff on top of each other as layers, and you can even just move the layers just to arrange the information in a way that you wish. But guys, there's a limitation. The maximum number of layers that you can add in Google My Maps is limited to 10. So that's something to keep in mind, but I think 10 layers would be quite sufficient for us, especially considering what we are going to do and considering what most of you guys potentially might be doing with this free mapping web application. And right below layers, you can see that there's one option called Basemap. So if you're not really happy with this Basemap that you get by default, you have the possibility of choosing from a number of different types of Basemaps. So let's say if you decide to go with a satellite view like this, all you have to do is just click over here and the map will get changed automatically. And similarly, if you go with the terrain view, this is how it's going to look. And in certain cases, this dark landmass map also can come in handy. As you can see, it looks pretty cool. And right next to that, you have the light landmass map type as well. However, for this tutorial, I'm actually going to go ahead with this simple atlas type base map. Well, for no particular reason, but I feel like any information that we add on top of this map would sort of stand out, and it'll be clear for us to distinguish between all of these different stuffs and labels that are actually going on in the background if we were to use this kind of map. But of course, it depends on your personal preference, and this is what I would actually prefer to use for this example. Alright, so once you're done setting up your base map, let's go ahead and explore these different layering options. So as the very first layer, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add Placemarks to highlight the 6 or 7 different locations that's going to be important when planning this journey. So that's going to include the airport as well as the Wheatlands Lodge and the 5 different attractions that I'm going to visit in the city of York. And just because all of these place marks are going to actually hold similar properties in terms of how it's going to get appeared on the map, I can group everything into just one single layer rather than an individual layer for an individual place mark. Before I add the place marks, I'm just going to click over here on this layers panel and I'm going to change the name of the layer. So we can just give it a simple name called points of interest and click save. And after that, we can go to this small toolbar. Now I'll be actually taking you through all of these different tools one by one. And we'll get to each specific applications when we actually come to that. So for example, right now when we need to add place marks, all you have to do is just click over here and activate the add marker tool. And after that, as the very first point or as the very first place mark, I'm going to navigate to the south side just a little bit until I can see this Leeds East Airport right over here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually drop a place mark just like this, and let's call it Leeds East Airport. And if you think that you need to add a small description, you can do that as well. So let's say if you're giving instructions to a person, you can just add a quick note saying that this is the airport that you'll be landing at. After that, you can just take a taxi or a cab to a place called Wheatlands Lodge. Now, if you really want to be helpful and even provide an image along with this place mark, you can do that simply by clicking over here. Now, as you guys can see, you have quite a different number of options when it comes to uploading an image. So you can upload an image that you might have in one of your drives through this upload option. Or let's say if you just want to search for an image on the spot using Google image search. All you have to do is just enter the search query over here and it'll provide you the results that you normally would have gotten if you were to do an individual Google image search, and you can actually pick an image from there as well. And not only that, if you would like to add a supplementary YouTube video, you can even do that by heading over to this YouTube search tab, and you can basically search for the video that you like, and that'll basically get tagged with the other pieces of information that you're trying to attach to this particular place mark. So in this example, I'm just going to upload one of my own images. Well, one of the images that I downloaded from the official website of the Leeds East Airport webpage. So let's head over to this upload tab and click right over here, and then navigate to your working folder, click open, and that'll kind of get attached as an image to this place mark, just like this. Pretty cool, isn't it? So after that, you can just click save over here to basically get done with it. And just like that, we are done with the very first place mark. So next, I would like to add another place mark to highlight the location to which we are actually going to arrive from Leeds East Airport, and that's called Wheatlands Lodge. But you might think that even though it was quite easy to find the location of the Leeds East Airport just by panning the map around, because it basically happens to be one of the well-known locations, finding the Wheatlands Lodge might not be that straightforward. So in such a case, what you can do is you can actually make use of this search panel to search for a well-known landmark, a location, or even an address. Pretty much similar to how you would use the search panel when you're using either Google Maps or Google Earth platforms. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to search for Wheatlands Lodge, and as you can see, you're going to get a couple of different Wheatlands Lodge results. So as long as you know that you're actually referring to the one in York, you can just click over here and that'll basically add a temporary placemark like this at the correct location. So what we can do is we can basically head back to this add marker button again and add a placemark of our own. We can name this as Wheatlands Lodge. And again, if it's going to be helpful to add an image, especially if you're providing directions to a person who has never been here, without a doubt, it's going to be helpful if you actually happen to add a couple of images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually add an image by heading over to my working folder, and this is going to be the image of the Wheatlands Lodge. And after that, click Save. So you can see that right now on your map, you have two place marks that you added. So you have the Leeds East Airport place mark right over here. And in addition to that, you have the Wheatlands Lodge place mark that you added just a couple of seconds ago. And once you're done with that, you can basically go ahead and clear this temporary place mark that you found as a result of the search that you did. And now I think we can mark down the 5 different locations or 5 different tourist attractions that we're actually going to visit in the city of York. Now, an important point to keep in mind is that when adding place marks, you don't necessarily have to add your own place mark and type everything by yourself, especially if it's a very well-known landmark or a place that you can simply search and find out from Google Maps. By the way guys, I'm going to leave this Leeds East Airport as well as the Wheatlands Lodge under a layer called Points of Interest, but the 5 different locations or the 5 different places that we are going to visit, I'm going to add them under a different layer. So to add a different layer, all you have to do is just click over here under add layer and it'll basically create another layer for you guys. So it's always the good practice to click right over here and change the name of the layer. So the second layer is going to be Places to Visit. And as I told you guys at the beginning, we're going to visit 5 different places in the city of York. So that's what we are going to actually add under these Places to Visit layer. And every time when you're working on a layer, you can see that right now there's this sort of blue vertical bar that's appearing under Places to Visit layer. However, if you want to do some edits to the previous layer, you can basically set the currently active layer by moving your mouse cursor like this and toggling the corresponding layer on and off. So you can see that as soon as I added the second layer, we have the option to actually toggle between these 2 different layers. And let's see if I just happen to go ahead and add a random place mark. While I have activated this Places to Visit layer, that place mark is actually going to get added under this particular layer. So let's say for example, if I were to add a random place mark right over here, you can see that that point 1 is actually getting added under this Places to Visit layer. However, let's go ahead and get rid of this point 1 and have this layer selected, and if I were to do the same, you can see that now that point is actually getting added under this points of interest layer instead of the Places to Visit layer. So that's how you basically determine or define the active layer that you're working on at any given point. So any changes that you would do would basically be reflected on that active layer that you're currently working on. Alright, I guess that's clear for you guys. So let's go ahead and get rid of this temporary layer as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to head back to this Places to Visit layer and activate it first. And after that, I'm going to search for the National Railway Museum. That's the very first location that we're going to visit from the Wheatlands Lodge. So that's going to be National Railway Museum. You can see it's the very first response. There are actually a couple of different ways of adding place marks when it comes to highlighting locations. Now what you can do is you can either go over here and click on this add marker button and add your own place mark manually, or just because this National Railway Museum happens to be one of the well-known places, you can simply make use of this add to map function. Now what this does is, if you click over here, you can see that it's actually getting added as a place mark under the layer that you specified right over here. So you can see that we didn't really have to manually add a place mark. It just converted the information into a place mark as soon as I clicked on that add to map button. Now the cool thing with this is that along with the title, you actually get all these other different helpful information as well. For example, you can see that they have already included the address, the web page, as well as a telephone number right over here. And typically you would get a couple of images of this location as well. So all of that, including the latitude and the longitude information right over here, is basically getting recorded into a placemark for you as soon as you click that Add to Map button. So that's actually a huge advantage and a big time saver. So similarly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the remaining 4 locations as well. And the second point that we're going to visit is called York Minster, which is right over here. And again, we're not going to bother with doing our own placemarks. I'm just going to click Add to Map and that'll get added as a separate layer as well. And let's head on to the third location, which is York Castle Museum. Add that to the map. And the fourth location is York City Walls. Add that to the map as well. And finally, we are going to finish our trip by visiting the famous York Maze, which is located a few kilometers away from the main city. Add that to the map as well. Alright guys, now you can see that we have added place marks to highlight all the important locations for our trip. And as the next part, we'll see how we can basically change the styling of these different place marks. So when it comes to changing the style, you actually have a couple of different options. Now let's say if I were to head over to my points of interest layer, and if I want to make changes individually, let's say maybe change the color of this place mark. We can click over here on this paint bucket, and that'll basically give me the option to choose from a number of different colors like this. Unfortunately, they don't really give the option to select a color from a band of colors. Instead, what we get is actually a set number of colors like this, but I guess it works for what I'm trying to do. So let's say if I were to go with the green in this particular case, I can just click right over here, and you can see that the color of the icon actually gets changed over here. Now, not only that, if you would like to change the icon itself, you have quite a number of icons that you can choose from right over here. And if you think that you would like to explore more different options, if you click over here, you can see that you get access to quite a wide array of icons that you can choose from. And in this case, let's say since we are referring to an airport, if I try to search airport, you can see that a unique airport icon actually appears over here. So I think rather than going with this typical location icon, for this I can go with an airport icon just like this, which is going to make this point more obvious. So let's click OK. And similarly, if you would like to change properties corresponding to the Wheatlands Lodge, you can click on this paint bucket right over here. And let's say if I were to go with purple color for this, and as the icon, I'm just going to pick this one right over here. Alright, now you can see that it's quite easy to actually distinguish between the different types of icons when you make individual changes like this. Now let's say if you're not really keen on making changes individually one by one, but if you would like to make a specific change one time that gets applied to all of these different icons, you can actually do that as well. And I'm going to demonstrate that using this second layer, Places to Visit. And as you can see, by default for both of the layers, this individual styles option is actually the one that we get by default. But let's say if you would like to apply a unique style for all of these different place marks, what you can do is you can click right over here and expand this Group Places By option and select Uniform Style. So that means you're actually going to get a uniform styling for all of these different items. So it's kind of getting grouped together. And if you head over to the paint bucket and change the color or the icon type, all of the changes are actually going to get applied simultaneously to all of the place marks that you have on your map. And not just the color, even the icon itself as well. So let's say if you were to go with a different icon like this, all the changes will get applied immediately as soon as you click right over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to flip this back to this icon type with a bit of a dark blue color like this. And not only that, guys, if you would like to number the locations by a specific order, you can do that as well by heading over to Group Places By again, and you can select Sequence of Numbers. And if you do that, instead of having that icon, you can see that the points actually getting numbered just like this. Now this is going to be quite helpful, especially if you're giving directions, or if you're just providing some sort of a guideline for someone to visit different places in a specific order, just like what we're going to do right now. And if you would like to make changes to the order of these items, all you have to do is just click and drag it and drop it at the correct place that you think where it should be. Now, for example, let's say after you visit the York Castle Museum, if you want to visit York Maze, that means this York Maze should be denoted as number 4 instead of 5. So all you have to do is just drag this and drop it over here, and automatically the numbering will actually get changed to number 4, and the York City Walls will get marked as the 5th place, just like this. However, I'm going to undo this. So to undo stuff, either you can perform the same thing that you did simply by dragging this and dropping it where it's supposed to be, or you can use one of these tools over here to basically undo any action that you just performed. And guys, just as a side note, if you would like to add labels to each of these different locations, you can do that as well by heading over to the same place, and under set labels, you can just select name right over here, and all of these points will actually have its own label just like this, which actually can come in handy. And I'm going to do that to this points of interest layer as well. So we're going to set the labels by its name, and that's going to sort of activate this name Wheatlands Lodge right next to the icon. Alright guys, so we're pretty much done with setting the place marks. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick preview just to see how this map would look if we were to just, let's say, pass this map to somebody else, or even if we were to just publish this map in our own website. And when you're building a map like this step by step, I always actually recommend you guys to preview your map a couple of times at least, just to make sure that everything is in order before you proceed to the next step. So to preview a map, all you have to do is just click right over here, and it'll open up a new window, and that'll basically give you a quick preview of how your map is going to look like. So over here on the side, you're going to see that you have a very interactive interface in terms of you being able to zoom in and zoom out to the map just like this. And at the same time, if you would like to turn on and off certain different layers, you can do that simply by clicking on these checkboxes as well. Let's say if you just wanted to show the places to visit rather than showing these points of interest, you can just activate this like this. So we'll activate both the layers. And not only that, if you would like to get information about each of these different items, you can click over here, and that'll basically open up a side panel like this, and that's going to tell you what this location is going to be, as well as any descriptions that you added previously. And that's going to be applicable for basically all the different place marks. If I were to click on this Wheatlands Lodge, you can see that it basically displays the image that I imported along with the name, which is going to be quite helpful, let's say if you are giving directions to a person. And similarly, if I were to click on one of these places to visit, let's say if I were to click on this York Castle Museum, you can see that even though I didn't really add this image by myself, just because it happens to be a well-known landmark that's identified by Google through Google Maps, you have the luxury of automatically getting all of this good stuff just by using that Add to Map button rather than having to create your own place mark. And along with that, you can see we get all these different other types of information as well, which is going to be quite helpful. Let's say if you want to make a reservation, or if you want to make a quick call before you actually visit the place. Alright guys, so I guess you get the basic idea. So I'm going to exit out from this map, and that'll put us right back into the map that we were working on previously. Alright, now we'll see how we can specify driving and walking directions on the map that we have to take when we need to get from one place to another. Now, I think it goes without saying that to get from Leeds East Airport to Wheatlands Lodge, we probably have to drive or take a cab or a taxi. However, once we reach Wheatlands Lodge, we can do the exploration of item number 1, 2, 3 and 4 just by walking. And From number 4, that's the York City Walls, again to York Maze, we might actually have to take a cab. So that's how we're going to specify the trip from number 4 to number 5. So we can actually set all of these different route arrangements in Google My Maps. And there are a couple of different ways of doing that. So I'll show you guys the first way to do that. And that would be by simply heading over to this Draw a Line button and specifying whether you want to add a driving route, a cycling route, or a walking route. And since we're going to specify the route from Leeds East Airport to Wheatlands Lodge, let's go with this Add Driving Route. And notice what happens as soon as I click over here. It's going to open up a new layer, and the shape of my mouse pointer changes to a cross like this, which indicates that it wants us to click on a starting point or a starting location, as you can see from this quick message that we get over here as well. So click on the map to start tracing your route. So what I can do is I can actually zoom out just a little bit and zoom back in to make sure that I get to the starting point like this. And I'm going to click somewhere over here to specify the starting point, which gets denoted by this A sign right over here. And once I do that, as soon as I drag my cursor away from the starting point, you can see that it's automatically finding me the best driving route depending on the traffic conditions, which is quite handy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out and zoom back in to Wheatlands Lodge, and I'm going to specify the finishing point somewhere over here, just like this. However, if you were to click just once, you can see that the route tracing doesn't really come to a halt. So if you would like to stop the route tracing altogether, what you can do is just make sure you double click, and that'll bring your route tracing to a halt, just like this. And now if you zoom out, you can see the route that you're actually supposed to take if you were to drive or take a taxi from Leeds East Airport to the Wheatlands Lodge. And that's getting specified as a unique layer right over here. But this doesn't really mean that we don't really have any options to make changes accordingly. We can actually do quite a number of things to this layer, starting from changing the heading. So I'm just going to get rid of this very descriptive heading and just going to put a title saying directions from Leeds East Airport to Wheatlands Lodge. And the starting point would be Leeds East Airport. Again, if you want to edit the name and probably get rid of this other stuff, you can just delete it like this. And similarly, for the point B, I'm going to enter the name Wheatlands Lodge. And let's say for some hypothetical reason, if you wanted to see how the route would look like if you were to, however unrealistic it might be to walk from A to B or cycle from A to B, you can actually click right over here and change the transportation mode to either cycle or walking as well, and it'll automatically change the route accordingly. So let's say if you were to cycle, so it's giving us actually a completely different route if you were to cycle from A to B. And again, hypothetically, if you were to walk, yeah, it's basically giving the same route for cycling and walking. However, if you were to drive, it's actually rerouting you to a different highway like this. So since that's out of the way, let's mark out the walking routes from Wheatlands Lodge to our point number 1, which is the National Railway Museum. And then from National Railway Museum to York Minster, from York Minster to York Castle Museum, and from here to York City Walls, and finally to York Maze. So as I told you guys, if you want to add directions, you can either head over to this Draw a Line button and select the walking route from here, or you have the option to use this Add Directions button directly. However, if you were to use this button, you can see that similarly a layer gets opened up. But if you were to use this button, you can see that we don't really have the option of selecting a location manually, just like what we did before. So instead, it's basically asking us to enter the location. So I'm just going to specify the starting location to be Wheatlands Lodge, and the point B is actually going to be this National Railway Museum. That's the first point. So that's the first one right over here. And of course, we are not driving, we are going to walk. So I'm just going to select this option right over here. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a couple more different layers which demarcates this particular route. And the method of doing that is basically exactly the same, just that your starting point and the ending point is going to be different. So I'm just going to fast forward the video from this point until I map the routes from number 4 all the way until York Maze. So let's go ahead and add a new layer. Alright guys, so as you can see, I have set the first 4 layers to be walking, because within the city itself, walking is going to be manageable, but to get from point number 4 to point number 5, we're actually going to be driving, or basically we'll be taking a taxi. So that's what I have denoted over here in this 5th layer. So if I activate all the different routes, basically this is how the entire map is going to look. You can see that as you add stuff to the map, things tend to get crammed up like this. So just for your own convenience, if you wish, you can actually turn the layers on and off, just like this. And before we head over to the next part, we can again go ahead and see how this map appears when we preview it. Now you can see that if you want to check the directions from Leeds East Airport to the Wheatlands Lodge, this is how it's going to appear. And you can basically turn on and off the directions. Let's say if you wanted to walk from Wheatlands Lodge to the National Railway Museum, you can basically activate that route just like this. And similarly, if you wanted to get the routes from National Railway Museum to York Minster, you would probably have to walk back like this and take this route until you reach this point B right over here, which is right next to the entrance of York Minster. So you guys get the basic idea. Now, given that the preview looks all good, we can exit out from this and head back to our main map. Now, I think we are slowly coming to the end of this tutorial. And before we go ahead and finish this tutorial, I would also like to take you through a couple more different options that you can play around when using Google My Maps. Now, this ruler can be quite helpful, especially when measuring distances and areas. So let's say if you wanted to get the rough distance from York City Walls to York Maze for some reason, you can just click on this ruler button and you can draw a line like this, and it'll show you that roughly the direct distance is about 6.61 kilometers. And similarly, you can measure short distances as well. Let's say if you wanted to measure the distance from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and 3 to 4, the cumulative distance is going to be 2.56 kilometers. So unless you hit the escape button, you can see that it'll basically keep on adding nodes, and the value that you see at the edge would be basically the cumulative distance along that path that you created. Alright, so let's hit escape to get rid of that path. And let's say instead of measuring distances, if you would like to measure areas, you can do that as well, simply by using this tool. So to measure areas, all you have to do is just activate the tool again. And this time, instead of drawing just a line, what you have to do is just create a polygon and make sure that you complete the circuit by clicking over the starting point just like this. And you can see that it's basically showing you two different things. It's showing you the total perimeter, which happens to be 6.98 kilometers. And at the same time, the area of this polygon is 2.75 square kilometers. So that can actually be quite handy. Now at the same time, if you would like to add lines or polygons to mark different things on your map, you can do that as well by heading over to this draw a line button, and you can add a line or a shape. So to add a line, basically all you have to do is just draw a line like this and double click to finish the line. And for this particular map, I'm not really going to add a line, so I'm just going to name this as test because I'll be deleting that later. And as you can see, because I happen to select this points of interest layer while I was drawing the line, it gets added as one of the features of this points of interest layer. So if you wanted to add these geometrical items under a separate layer, all you have to do is just create a new layer and make sure that you select that particular new layer before you draw the geometrical items. And right over here you can see the total length of the line. In this case it's 4.01 kilometers. And of course you can make changes to the line style as well. Well, one of the changes would be changing the color like this, and of course you have the option to change the width of the line as well, just like this. However, for this example, I'm not really in need of a line, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click over here on this delete place icon, and that's basically going to get rid of the line that I drew just now. Now, even though I might not add a line, I'm thinking of actually adding a polygon just to mark out the general extent of the area that we are going to cover during our first day of visiting these different locations in York. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new layer called coverage, and make sure that I have selected this new layer. And now I'm going to go back to the same tool, draw a line or shape, and this time instead of drawing just a line, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to roughly trace a polygon in this manner to sort of roughly mark out the extent that we are going to cover during our first day of exploring different attractions in York. And to convert this line into a polygon, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I end this line at the same exact point that I started the line. So when you click over here, it'll basically get converted into a polygon instead of a line. So I'm just going to name this as coverage, and we'll go ahead and save this. And at the same time, you will have the options to change the styling as well. So I'm going to change the color to be green. However, I should make sure that this polygon doesn't really distract these different locations that I marked out previously. So what I can do is I can increase the transparency to a suitable level, just so that I would still be able to see this coverage, and at the same time these different place marks as well. And of course you can play around with the border size as well, but I'm just going to keep the border size to be a minimum, just like this. And you can exit out from that. And now if you quickly check out the preview, this is how it's going to look. So that coverage is actually getting appeared as a new layer over here, which you can again turn on and off if you wish to do so. Alright, let's go back to the map, and I think we have reached almost the end of the tutorial. And one important thing to highlight before we actually conclude the tutorial is that you can remember that when we switch on the preview, this is the zoom extent that you're going to see by default. Now let's see if I happen to zoom in to my coverage area like this, and if I were to click on preview again, you can see that it didn't really take into account what I zoomed into. It's basically fixing its zoom level to this sort of a fixed zoom level that basically encompasses all these different features that we marked down. However, there is this option to actually manually set the zoom level that you would like to have, especially if you're passing this map to somebody else and if you would like for them to see a certain part of the map as soon as they open the map. For an example, rather than seeing the entire map, if you want them to just see this part of the map, what you can do is you can actually fix your zoom level like this, and after that you can go to this menu right over here and select set default view. Now once you set the default view to be this zoom level, if you happen to click on this preview button, you can see that now the map that gets opened up will no longer show a zoomed out view just like what we saw before, but it'll be sort of focusing on this coverage that we marked out by specifying a set zoom level. Now if you want to be a bit more specific when it comes to your zoom level, let's say if you want to only zoom into these 4 different attractions which are located right around the city center of York, what you can do is you can kind of zoom in like this, and you can set this to be your default view. And now if you click on preview, you can see that it's basically taking you directly to the city center as soon as you open the map rather than showing you the entire thing. So that's actually something to keep in mind. And at the same time, you have the option to view all of these different features that you marked down in Google Earth as well. So let's say if you expand the menu and if you click View in Google Earth, like this, you can see that the whole thing actually gets opened up in Google Earth as well, along with the layer information on the left side as a panel, as you can see over here. Now, one of the cool things with being able to use Google Earth is you actually can exploit the Street View functionality before even physically visiting the place. For example, let's say if you wanted to see how the Street View looks like around National Railway Museum, what you can do is you can click this button right over here and drag it and make sure you place this little guy somewhere over here, and that'll kind of take you right into the corresponding Google Street View. So you will know where you're exactly supposed to be when you physically get there. And not only that, along with these different features, you can basically make use of all the different functionalities that come with Google Earth itself as an aid to your overall planning process. So I'm not going to spend much time in Google Earth because Google Earth by itself is actually a completely different topic, which we also have covered in this channel quite a few times. So I'm just going to exit out from here. Alright, now we'll see how we can share this map with others. So right over here in the middle, you can see a button called share. So that's how we actually activate permission side of things to share this map with somebody else. So if I click over here, you can go ahead and activate this first button, which says anyone with the link can view this map. So by sharing, what we're going to do is we're basically going to copy this link and pass this link to somebody else so that they can just paste it on their web browser and they would be able to see this map as well. So I'm just going to copy this link, and after that, let's close this. And to demonstrate to you guys the case of somebody else opening this map using a completely different web browser, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually open up a different web browser. Let's go with the Microsoft Edge and paste that link right over here. And as you can see, this is how the final map looks. And we are no longer using our Chrome browser. We are using a completely different browser, and we are just relying on the link that we just copied out from Google My Maps. So let's say if you wanted to explore the map part by part, what we can do is we can first check the directions from Leeds East Airport to Wheatlands Lodge. So these are the driving directions, and after that we can deactivate that and we can get the directions from walking directions from Wheatlands Lodge to the National Railway Museum, and similarly the walking and driving directions to the other attractions as well. And at the same time, just like what we did before, if you click over here on Wheatlands Lodge, you can see that they will be able to see the image that we imported previously, and along with any information that you added under description, as well as the name of course, and information about these places to visit as well. Alright guys, so let's head back to the My Maps editing window. And finally, before we conclude the tutorial, in case if you'd like to embed this map in one of your own websites, you can do that as well. Simply by copying this code right over here by heading over to menu. And from here, there's one option called Embed on My Site. And from here, all you have to do is just copy out this HTML code and paste it in the source code of your web page. And that way, you would be able to transfer this interactive map onto your web page as well. Alright guys, so we covered quite a lot of things, and that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope the steps were clear for you guys, and I hope you guys can see what an interesting tool Google My Maps can be when planning out your trips. Alright guys, so if you did enjoy the tutorial, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well if you would like to stay tuned for this kind of interesting tutorials on a weekly basis. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you guys again soon.